Ready? Oh, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our regularly scheduled, this is a business meeting. So first of all, I intend to entertain a motion to come out of closed session. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're out of closed. Well, welcome. We've been in closed session. The board has been in closed session since 6 p.m. tonight. And we're joining you here with, first of all, we'll start with our mission statement. Our mission here in District 203 is to educate our students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. Next, we'll go to the roll call.
Board members present: Charles Cush, Kristen Fitzgerald, Mike Yench, Donna Wanke, Susan Fadi, and Jackie Dahlberg.
Okay, at this point, if you're able, I'd appreciate it if you can join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we get on to the rest of the meeting, if you would be so kind as to indulge me, the last time I had to do this was almost 4 years ago. It was shortly after a horrific accident or incident at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Now we find ourselves here almost 4 years later, not with 1, 2, or 3, but just unbelievable horror. Without editorializing on this, obviously the last week has been horrific. You know, whether it be in Baton Rouge, Dallas, Nice, wherever innocents are senselessly killed. I'd like to ask for just a moment of silence to reflect on what has happened over the past week. I thank you for your indulgence. Okay, first item on the agenda is a public hearing regarding a waiver for online and blended seat time, and we'll go into quite a bit of detail on that. First of all, the plan is we'll call to order the public hearing regarding the Naperville Community Unit School District application for waiver. Then we'll move on from there. So first thing I'll do is call the meeting public hearing to order for the consideration of waiver to our online and blended learning hours. Illinois statute requires that when a school district seeks a waiver from the school code, a public hearing be held. District 203 is seeking a waiver from the Illinois General Assembly in regard to having flexibility to offer blended learning. Basically, the steps we'll go through is we'll begin with comments from the administration. The administration's comments will be followed by public comment. The rules are the same as our normal public comment. We'll have that again later. But just on this issue, if you've signed up, great. If not, we're going to ask for input anyway. If you're an individual, it'll be 3 minutes. If you're a group, it'll be 5 minutes. After the public comment, the Board of Education will be invited to provide comment, and then the hearing will be closed. At this point, I'd ask Mr. Bridges to offer us his administration's comments.
Great. I'll just make a couple quick comments, and then Dr. Hester will make the majority of the administration's comments regarding this waiver. But again, this is an opportunity for us to seek waiver from the school code regarding seat time to allow us, as we look at how we design and provide online and blended instructional opportunities for our students, about the potential expansion for that. So Dr. Hester will walk through some of the rationale behind this request and the next steps in the process. So Dr. Hester.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to start with providing some background information to build understanding as to why we're seeking a waiver from the current school code on general state aid. Through our Focus 2020 Blueprint Commitment 116F, district leadership and staff have been working to provide a continuum of learning experiences through blended and online learning. For our district, online learning is an instructional model where students' instruction is delivered fully in the virtual environment, with a teacher leading the instruction and with our students engaging in learning course content, submitting their work, and completing the assessments in an electronic learning management system. We offer online learning courses for high school students during the summer and in the school year. Additionally, some of our students engage in online learning for credit recovery options. Blended learning is an instructional model where students learn in part in the physical classroom setting and in part in the virtual online setting. Variations of this model can be achieved fully in the brick and mortar school building, and other variations of this instructional model are achieved partially in the brick and mortar school and in a remote location away from school. In the past 2 to 3 years, we have had students engaged in rotational learning where they are in their classroom, and in that classroom, they rotate between working with the teacher or groups of students and working in the virtual environment. We've also had students engaged in flipped classroom models where they learn content at home through media and then engage in discussions and activities in the classroom. We have had students engage in lab rotation models and in individual learning in the physical space of the school building. In the spring of 2017, a couple of teachers from Naperville North and from Naperville Central High Schools will delve deeper into the lab rotation model by having their students learn in the classroom for part of the week and learn through self-paced or virtual synchronous and asynchronous instruction in the Learning Commons. At Central, 2 sections of Algebra 1 and 2 sections of Health will participate in this blended learning model. There's also a possibility that we might have some sections in psychology as well. At North, 1 section of American Government and 1 section of Consumer Economics will participate in the lab blended learning model. In the future, we'd like to have the opportunity to allow students to learn at school and in a remote location. However, the current Illinois school code for receiving general state aid limits us from exploring such innovative and meaningful learning designs. So seeking the proposed waiver is one step in our greater strategy to make learning more personalized, engaging, and relevant for our students. The purpose of this public hearing is to notify the public of Naperville 203's intent to seek board approval to modify the current Illinois School Code 105 ILCS 5/18 through 8.05 F sections 1 through 2. Currently, for purposes of general state aid, this school code provides that public school district can count as days of attendance days when students are physically present in school for 5 hours. Additionally, Illinois School Code 105 ILCS 5/10 through 29 allows districts to count as days of attendance when students are fully engaged in online learning programs completely away from school, and our remote educational policy accounts for that. Naperville 203 is seeking approval to modify the school code on the screen to expand an online blended learning model in which up to 2 hours of remote online learning combined with 3 hours of in-class learning instruction will satisfy the day of attendance requirement for state aid. The language for the proposed new provision of school code is written on the screen. I'm going to pause just for a minute so that you can read that. Again, the purpose of this modification to school code is to enable students to attend classes both physically and virtually as part of their Naperville 203 program of instruction. Students will maintain a daily attendance of 60% of their coursework in the face-to-face setting, while 40% of their coursework may be met through the attendance in the online setting offered as part of the district's curriculum. For the small percentage of students for whom, for some reason, need to access online learning for more than 40%, Naperville 203 will continue to fully comply with the Remote Educational Act, which is 105 ILSC 5/10 through 29.
Okay. I'd like to open it up for public comments now. No one signed up, but like I said, just raise your hand, throw something at me, anything. Okay, then I'll move on to board comments and questions. Nobody? That would have been something. Nobody wanted to be first. Susan?
So I just want to confirm that we're not allowing kids to take additional classes over and above their current load, so you wouldn't be stuck with 8, 9, 10 classes.
That's correct. We have not put into place anything that would allow them to take an overload.
And then the other question was on the testing part of it. Is that done in or out of the classroom or both?
It can be either. So you can test online through our Canvas learning management system or other applications. We always make sure that we have a secure testing environment for that. But you could also come in and take that assessment face-to-face.
And how do you feel that you confirm that it's the actual person taking the online class?
I could turn it over to Mr. Waranga, but I do know that there are codes that students have for the assessment.
And they can't share them?
Yes, typically when students use the online assessments, they're actually doing those in class and using the codes for that. But they, for most of the time when assessments are done at home, those are more formative type assessments that they could have a code, and certainly in that situation, it could be accessed if they gave it to someone, but usually that's only in a formative setting that teachers use that.
So, and then in the ELO setting, they're not coming in and taking them in class, so it's still offered through secure environments.
Oops, sorry. So I was just wondering what kind of indications we've had from our students that they're interested in kind of expanding their own ability to access the online curriculum as opposed to being in school.
Right. So I would say the interest that we have now is that we're offering an opportunity this spring, and we had quite a few students interested. So whether students have actually come to us and said, you know, we want this type of experience is another thing, but in offering it to them, we have the sections at North are populated and ready to run. Central is still in the process of communicating and getting support, but at this point, they already have 40 students at Central and between 50 and 60 at North.
Okay. And this doesn't, I had asked a question about this earlier. At Lynn, they had mentioned a little bit some legislation about snow days. So this won't change anything about that in terms of the snow day calculation. I know there's a couple of districts piloting that snow day calculation where they do
Yeah,
online.
I'll kind of comment. So no, this will not.
Right.
Just an interesting thing regarding that pilot is what didn't we have this year?
A snow day.
We didn't have any
Right,
emergency
so
days.
not able to do it.
So the 3 districts actually sought permission to dry run so that they could get the feedback, and they weren't allowed the opportunity to do that. So we still don't know how that's going to
Okay.
turn out.
But it wouldn't,
this is
nothing
not-
about this
no,
would
it not.
change. We
No.
wouldn't have to have the two, you know, like
Correct, no.
the percentages. Okay.
Just a couple quick questions. One being, I know, I read in the material that the enrollment is not as robust during the school year as it is in the summer. And the hope is that this will help that. Is that part of the?
I think it's, we expect enrollment to be higher in a blended program right now than what we've been experiencing online. And we feel that's because of the contact, there's more face-to-face contact with the teacher.
In the blended?
Yeah, and there's
Okay.
also opportunity for small group instruction and support. So for example, if a student is having, let's call it a blended day, and it's a day when they don't have to actually report to the physical classroom, a teacher can call a small group of students and have them work together and support those students in that environment. Plus, the teacher is in the building.
And the other thing I wanted to just make sure people at home that are listening, obviously my colleagues have read this, but in one of the attachments to this waiver, right at the end, which I thought was great that we circled back to, let me get it here. It said in short, Naperville 203, it mentions the mission and everything about the mission, and that Naperville 203 is proactively supporting students in meeting the district's mission, which is spelled out, as I said, and in preparing them for post-secondary success, which everybody that's ever listened to a board meeting knows how passionate I am, as well as a number of other people, that this we're trying to do what we can as a district to make them successful post-secondary in the instructional, and then I think at a later point, we'll talk about how we support this through counseling and in other ways as well. So, but thank you for adding that piece. I think that's our goal, and I'm glad it's in here.
One comment I wanted to make is, I think one of the big advantages, and you covered in detail in your supporting documents, are the possibilities to give kids or students more time for sleep. I thought it was interesting, he quoted the American Academy of Pediatrics that, points I've brought up before, improves physical and mental health, safety, academic performance, quality of life. I know we've talked about this before. I know the district is in the process of reviewing this and all the supporting documents in their review of the school day. Can you bring the board and the public up to date on where we are in that process?
Real quick in terms of our timeline, so for the past year, a committee of individuals in our district has met to review research and begin looking at and talking about potential options for school day, even school year, to be addressed. And so they came up with a number of things to look at. As you'll recall, I had mentioned in the spring when we were talking about the calendar that and you had approved a contract with K-12 Insight for the development of a community survey. So Bob Ross and Michelle Fragoso have been meeting most often with them and speaking with them most often, as well as other input from cabinet, and we should have drafts fairly soon. I can't remember the exact timeline, but soon, with the anticipation to go to the community just for some feedback and input this fall, and we should still be on track to have recommendations, if there are recommendations for changes to the board, I would anticipate by January.
Great, thank you. That's all I had. Was there anything else from the board? Any other comments, questions? And let me make sure, but I think that'll do it. So I'm hereby closing the hearing regarding the waiver for online blended seat time. We'll be addressing this again in action, in discussion with action. So, next item on the agenda is just to mention it was supposed to be good news.
It was supposed to be good news, and we've heard from the Special Olympics coach today, and they would like to come on August 15th instead. It'd be a little bit more convenient, so we will push that
Okay.
until then, and we will
looks-
recognize them then, and it is a big group to recognize,
It is
so
a
we're
big group.
excited
It's
and thrilled.
wonderful.
So you know what, good news, I always like to share this with the students, it's just about 1 month from today, kids. 1 month from today,
Oh, my
we'll kick off our school
goodness.
year, okay? So that is great news for all of us, and we will have even better news with recognition of our Special Olympics state champions at our August 15th meeting.
Okay, next on the agenda is public comment. Once again, as I said before, this is for anything except the online blended learning waiver. So if you have any comments, 3 minutes for individuals, 5 minutes for groups. Anybody? Okay, we'll move on. Monthly reports. We have our treasury report, investments, insurance, and budget reports. Were there any questions from the board? Comments? Okay, then I will move on to the consent agenda. I'll entertain, first of all, does anybody have anything they wanted to pull? So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So I move to approve items 8.01 through 8.05, including the bills and claims that I reviewed, with approval of warrant number 410498 through warrant number 410939, totaling $21,675,465.56 for the period of June 21st, 2016 to July 18th, 2016.
Okay, I have a motion and second to approve the consent agenda to include all items 801 through 805. Roll call, please.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Monke,
Yes.
Romberg. Yes. Yench,
Aye.
Patty. Yes. Bush.
Aye.
Motion carries.
So I just had one quick comment
Okay.
that we learned. It was great to have Charles join me in bills and claims, and we learned. I just thought this was great for the community and everyone to know that the district is constantly working on things to be more cost effective. And I learned today that we were working really diligently on streamlining our memberships to control costs for things like Sam's and Costco and particularly like Amazon Prime and things like that. So it was exciting to learn that they were working on making that more cost effective.
Great, thank you. Okay, on to communications. Not quite ready for the student ambassador reports yet. Maybe in August, we'll see. So written communications are there for your review. Basically, that's all the FOIAs we've received since the last meeting. Then on to superintendent, staff, and school reports.
No formal report this evening, just a couple of things that I will share with you. A couple you already are aware of, and a couple may be new for you. But as you are aware, the General Assembly at the end of June did pass funding for education, K-12 education in the state of Illinois. So some of the uncertainty we had regarding funding for the coming year has been answered for us with a commitment to increase funding for education. So we expect to receive some more dollars. We expect to. We hope that that goes through. What did not happen, though, with that we are hoping for is a long-term solution, a long-term decision regarding the funding of education in the state of Illinois. But a committee is to be assigned to work on that task. So we will need to remain vigilant and pay attention to what's happening in Springfield, and I'll keep you updated along the way regarding recommendations that are coming forward. So that's one. And then the second thing is it has received some fairly extensive coverage in most media outlets, but the State Board of Education announced that they will eliminate the PARCC assessment at the high school level using the SAT as its assessment. And that really was, from the high school perspective, a welcome decision that was made by the state. And so we will continue to move forward, as this board already had, regarding SAT. And again, as we look at budget, we did set aside money in the event that the state would not cover it. So that'll be an expense we will not have to take on this year, it doesn't look like. But as I said, we don't know how funding goes in Illinois, and so we may just want to not get too quick about that money right now. We'll kind of leave that there for now. Just a couple other quick notes. Today was a great day, again, for especially our junior high school teachers, but other teachers. We offered our second session of the Digital Learning Initiative training support for those teachers, and had an opportunity to sit through one of the sessions today, and really impressed with what our teachers are picking up in the presentations in terms of how helping our teachers understand how in the digital environment the tools that are available to them. So Jill Lavacek is here, who works in the Learning Services Department. She was one of the key people responsible for planning the event. So well done, Jill. It was a great job by you and all involved. Melissa Hampton, our Director of Professional Learning, and so many others. But then I had mentioned school starts in about a month, but school begins really on Wednesday for our newest teachers to District 203, who will be in district working in with, again, many members of our administrative team and staff in the district on their induction into District 203. So we're excited to welcome our new group of educators. So that's all I have.
So, no formal presentation. Okay. Okay, President's report. I have nothing at this point. The next item are the board committee liaisons. The public is able now to see what our board committees and school assignments are going to be for the next year. For everybody's information that is not aware of the process, basically we split up among the board, all 7 members, different committees that we liaison with during the year, during the school year, and we try to rotate those as fairly as possible from year to year. And the other program, which is a favorite for us, hopefully it's a favorite for the schools too, is we have what we call Adopt a Schools, where each board member is either given 3 or 4 of our schools, and that includes the Ann Reed Center and Connections. And then we go ahead and visit those schools as much as the school wants to, and the board member feels like they can be a positive influence. Mostly it's just to show the flag, so to speak, and I think it's a wonderfully rewarding experience. I know it is for me, I'm sure it is for the rest of the board members, and hopefully it is for the schools. So the list is there. Once again, it's based on starting with the least schools we've least been in over the last, for some of us, 8+ years. So in any case, the list is there. I'm not going to go through it all. Were there any comments or questions from the board itself? Okay. The next item technically is the board adopt the schools. It's the same sheet of paper, so it's still the same thing. Then I'll open it up for any Board of Education reports. Chris?
Well, I, on behalf of Susan and Charles, who are all there, and as well as Terry and Dan, it was a great event for the NEF golf outing that was just last Monday night. I believe there was quite hot weather during the day. I was not golfing, but true, and we'll take good weather as opposed to rain. So it was so nice to have the support of the community and the NEF trustees as they put together that really fantastic event. I know there were several administrators who were there golfing as well, so thank you for your attendance.
Any other board reports? No? Okay. Then we're on to discussion without action. And as we've been doing for quite some time now, we're reviewing all our policies one by one. We have 3 on the docket for tonight, so I'll turn it over to Superintendent.
Well, you said most of what I was going to say, so that's good. Yes, we have, continue our process. We do have 3 more policies, policies with slight recommendations for change, but are probably going to lead to some discussion that we anticipate we want board input on. So I will turn it over to Mr. Ross to present board policies 7160, 7170, and 7275. Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Good evening. Yes, if you look at the cover memo, it lists those 3 policies, and then as an attachment in board docs in each case, you have the current policy, and then if you scroll through, you'll get to what we are proposing. So the first one, 7160, concerns student appearance. The proposed changes are minor, and it would, what the proposals would do is to take appearance into effect instead of just dress and grooming. You'll see in red the proposed changes are minor. Any questions I could answer on 7160?
Charles?
So as I read through this, it just seems a bit broad. Would it be possible for you to provide some examples as to what would constitute an appearance that disrupts the educational process, just for perspective?
Sure. And what we have in our student handbooks is a more specific dress code that would give some more detail. But even with that, new things come up. When I would talk to students, I used to talk about there's a proper place to wear certain things. So if you're at Centennial Beach and wearing a bikini, that might be appropriate. To wear a bikini in the lunchroom at school would not be appropriate. And the kids go, oh, yeah, of course. So even things that are in one closet that might be appropriate has a lot to do with the setting, right? So that would cause a disruption in the school day, and that would not be permitted. I don't know that we have bikinis spelled out in our handbook, but there's an example of something that would violate our dress code and also violate this
Swimwear, I
policy.
do believe swimwear. Yeah.
Thank you.
Donna?
So I had 2 quick questions. One, is there a reason that we took the legal references out of this? And then my second question is, I understand the, as Charles questioned, on the broadness of it, I understand that dressing inappropriate, but can you give us an example of grooming inappropriately?
Not sitting here. I think I'd have to look at the code itself and see the case, see the case before us. So what our administrators would do is, if there were an adult in the building who said, I think this is a violation, the administrator would meet with the student, assess the situation, and determine whether or not it's in violation. I'm having a little trouble thinking of one sitting here. And as for the legal references, these came from the Illinois Association of School Board. And one of the things they do is they help keep track of different court cases as case law evolves, and different citations that are most appropriate to the policies. So in this particular case, I have to confess, I'm not sure what happened with Chandler versus McMillanville. It may be that another court reversed that decision, but what this is saying is that is no longer a court case on which we should rely on this policy. But there is, you see the Tinker case that's written there, and we ought to rely on that in the formation of this policy.
Other questions? Comments? Okay, next.
Next policy is 7170, entitled Vandalism. And if you compare the current policy to the proposed, you'll see that in addition to the updated date and an updated cross-reference, the significant change is the proposed striking of the last part of the final sentence. So currently, the policy reads, the board will seek restitution from students and their parents' guardians for vandalism or other student acts which cause damage to school property or to property of employees and/or fellow students. In this case, we first spotted the revised policy, again, when the IASB had a proposal. But as we looked at it, considered and discussed it, we had some lively discussion on this one and ended up settling on proposing to strike this. Here's what happens in the case of vandalism, for instance. If there's vandalism and let's say another student is a victim, principal, assistant principal, dean, someone like that would meet with the student. If it's identified that a student vandalized the property of another, best practice is to work with that student, work with that student's family, help the student see what he'd done that was wrong, and identify ways to address that concern. And that might very well be speaking with the parents, helping the parents to help the child understand what he did, and coming up with a plan to make restitution. Very appropriate. Moving forward, we would seek to do exactly that to continue. Lots of times families would be very responsive to that and very willing to do that. Sometimes a student or family might be reluctant to do that for whatever reason. Maybe they don't see it as just, or maybe there's complicating factors of other things that happen on the weekend or another time of which we may not be aware. So they may not be interested in making restitution on that. Or maybe it wasn't vandalism at all. Maybe, as the policy said, maybe it was another student act. So that could be a high school driver has a car accident in the parking lot at Naperville Central with another student's car. What the proposed policy is saying is, although the district would certainly help the family to see what's going on, encourage making proper restitution as best practice, when it came time to pursuing restitution, that would need to be done by the victim. So if the district were the victim, let's suppose a student accidentally drove into a school bus in the parking lot, the school district would be the victim, we would pursue. If it were a staff member or if it were another student, they would have the opportunity to pursue.
So under that one, sorry, my screen just turned black. So what if there were other costs involved, say ambulance or some, EMS that needed to respond because of the vandalism? Is it possible to add or other costs, something like that in there? Because we've had those situations before where we're required to do those things. Or say somebody was hospitalized because of the vandalism, it costs us money on our health insurance, something like that. Is that something we could consider? Because it's only school property, but some of our property is our investments that we make and.
Yeah, we can look at what some of that. We can certainly review what some of that language would look like if your colleagues agree that that's something you want us to look at.
Excuse me, I guess my question is, what was the impetus for the change? What was the impetus for, was this press, was this?
It was press. We noticed a difference between the press version and our own.
Right,
But sometimes we notice that and say,
it doesn't, yeah, it
in this
doesn't work
particular,
best for us.
right, but in particular this case, after talking it through, we decided to bring it forward.
I
So
guess
the
what-
impetus
what-
was press.
This is the one when in my intro, I said we'll probably have some discussion on, because
Right.
we want to hear the board's perspective.
Right.
The angle we ended up going with was supporting the recommendation for the change, because we're recommending that when it be like student A and student B involved, and let's say it's maybe at a football game, after school, still school event, the policy as written would imply that the district would take responsibility, whether it be through asserting use of its legal counsel or make other expenditures to seek that restitution. Whereas the policy, by striking that, we would certainly continue to work with families to try to encourage the restitution to occur, but the cost for any process that would have to take place seeking restitution, if it was being contested, like I don't want it, I'm not paying for that, or I'm not doing that, would have to be taken on by the victim.
Donna? Was it on Susan's point or something different?
It's on this proposed
Okay.
policy. So that doesn't limit us, though, like if there was damage done to, say, a teacher's vehicle and I don't know, for whatever reason, the school felt the need to seek restitution, this doesn't limit us from doing that. It just doesn't make us have to do it, correct?
Correct. I
Okay.
wouldn't read it as limiting us from doing that.
I guess I don't understand that, because it's, if I'm reading it right, it says when damage to school property, that teacher's vehicle is not school property. It's on school property, but it's not school property.
But the language is not exclusive.
The-
It doesn't
right.
say
No,
we
I understand.
can't.
I
That's
understand.
what- That was her point, was it didn't
Oh, okay.
exclude it.
I see
Right.
your point, okay.
So my question was, it wasn't just school property, it would be for other costs that we could incur because
Yeah,
of-
I see that, and I think we're going to look at, as long as,
Yeah, I
I'm seeing
think
some
it's
head
not
shakes,
as-
so we'll look at what some of that language would look like, could get a.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else on the vandalism? So,
So we're going to maintain the language stricken, and we'll look at other language that incorporates Mrs. Crotty's recommendation. So you have an opportunity to see that language before being asked to act. We'll bring it back for without action. So you see the new language and then action at a future board meeting.
and
And one
I
thing you
think
might-
oh,
go
I
ahead.
think the one point is, it's not just school property. And I understand your point about if someone else is hurt,
Right.
that they legally will have to pursue their own damages, and we can facilitate. But if we incur costs
Correct.
outside of
Right.
property, you
Yep.
know,
Right.
We might want to give ourselves some flexibility. It says here, this is proscriptive, we will seek. And so on
Right.
other outside costs, you might want a little bit more flexibility that you
May.
don't always.
Or shall.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say may for that, but
Right.
will for the other.
Okay.
well, you can seek them, doesn't mean you're going to get them.
Right, right.
We don't want to have our hands tied that we must, if it's not in our best interest.
Right.
Great.
Hey, 275, I believe?
And 7275, again, the proposed changes are very minor, just adding another legal reference and an updated date.
Any questions or comments from the board? Very minor.
Great. So we will come back at the next board meeting looking for action on 7160 and 7275, and we'll come with a recommendation for your review without action on 7170.
Bingo.
Anything else from the board? Okay, on to discussion with action. Second part, policy review. These are policies we talked about last month. So we'll start with an introduction from.
Yeah, again, continuing, these were brought forward at a previous Board of Education meeting, so you've had a look at each of these policies. There was a question regarding in-school suspension procedures. Mr. Ross will be prepared to provide an overview of those. We did note a section of one of the policies was duplicated. It was that way in June, too. but-
It was,
Yeah, so.
I thought I'd
we've-
lost my mind.
We've
but yeah.
taken that out, yeah. And I think
know,
because
did.
of where it occurred on a
Right.
page break,
Yeah.
well, I'm trying to think of an excuse.
Well, it kept, you kept thinking that it was supposed to be two different cases.
Right. Then you went back, yeah.
Mr. Ross, please, 7200.
On 7200, there are a couple of changes from when we were before the board last month. So the bulk of the changes, proposed changes to 7200 are in red text and are a result of alignment with Senate Bill 100 and the new law. And we've talked extensively about that at prior board meetings. Since the meeting in June, we've made some changes in blue, highlighted in blue just to call to your attention. It's different from what you saw when it was discussion without action. First, on the first page of proposed 7200, down toward the bottom of the page, you'll see that we proposed to strike something that had been in red last month. And what happened here was, as we continue to work with our attorneys, specifically in writing letter templates for suspensions that we would use in the coming school year, we worked with our attorney, and our attorney identified that the policy that we brought to you last month required a little too much of the district. As proposed, required us to distinguish for a parent and justify why a suspension might be 2 days instead of 3 days, or 4 days instead of 5 days, and so on. And the law, upon further review, doesn't actually call for that. It does call for, and we will in our letters and in practice, it does call for us providing information listed below. So we need to justify, we need to explain why a student is being suspended, but we don't need to go as far as distinguishing between 6 days and 7 days. And we had proposed to kind of hold ourselves to that standard. So now in blue, we're striking that and ask that we not hold ourselves to that standard. And we are certain that we are in compliance with the law, and this matches what we're trying to do. On the next page, the top of page 2 of the proposed policy, you'll see we propose to just combine 2 bullet points into 1 bullet point that we think reads better and is, once again, still aligned with the law. So overall, the proposed changes to 7200 we think will bring us up to speed with the new law and all the presentation and discussion we've had here, and we look to implement these when school starts in a month.
Could you remind me, for an in-school suspension, is a student still allowed to ride the bus?
It's a good question. And I do want to talk about in-school suspension and then take any questions about 7200. At the end of the day, yes, Mrs. Crotty. If a student has no other way to get to school or to get home from school, yes, we want that student to come to school. In practice, what we do for an in-school suspension is we will often meet with the parent and talk with them about the wisdom of having that student be driven to school and driven home from school on that day, the day of the in-school suspension. Okay? But at the end of the day, if they have no other way to get to school, yes, instead of having them stay home and consider it an out-of-school suspension, we would want them to come to school for an in-school suspension. During an in-school suspension, we would like them, while on campus, to be with adult staff and to not be with other students, and that includes at the bus stop, on the bus, when they first arrive at school before first period.
And
So
how
our-
about their lunchtime?
And during the lunchtime, they would remain in the in-school suspension room. They would not be with the rest of the students.
And so our schools are tight on space? Explain to me how that works exactly.
Sure.
Like,
Right. At the 2 high schools, we have a classroom right now that we use for in-school suspension. We do predict we're going to use it more often, or for more students in any given day, than we have in the past. But we have a classroom that we, in each case, that we believe is large enough for the number of students that we'll have.
Can I just make a point of clarification for those who may be watching or our community? Not because we're anticipating increase in behaviors that warrant in-school suspensions, but we expect an increase in the use of the in-school suspension by being offset by a reduction in out-of-school suspensions.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Yes, we want to reduce our exclusionary discipline.
Because of Senate Bill 100, correct, right?
Instead of excluding students and telling them that they could not come to school, we expect to use in-school suspension more frequently than we have in the past, instead of out-of-school suspension. While the students are in-school suspension at the high school level, we're going to see in-school suspension as an intervention program that allows students to remain in school while still being held accountable. In-school suspension will be used as a reintegration plan that provides a transition step, in some cases, from an out-of-school suspension back to a student in good standing status. The program is a purposeful attempt to apply strategies that empower the student to successfully navigate into a positive school environment. During in-school suspension, the student will have contact with teachers, with academic study time, and be able to make up or keep up with classwork. There'll be a reflection activity and an individual meeting with an assigned team member, which might be a dean and or a counselor and or school psychologist. And the meeting with the team member is designed to help the student identify reasons for his behavior that required the in-school suspension and steps that can be taken to avoid recurrence of such behavior. We also have in place now in-school suspension at our middle school level. There are less suspensions at middle school. There's been less out-of-school suspensions. Once again, instead of excluding, we will try to suspend students in school instead of out of school, but there will be less, I predict there'll be less middle school in-school suspensions than there are high school in-school suspensions. The middle schools have a smaller room, typically in the office area, and that is supervised by the administrators, often one of the assistant principals or both of the assistant principals, who themselves also check in with the students frequently. Very common for a school psychologist or counselor, teachers to come in and check with the students as well. So many of the things that are in place at the high school will be in place at the middle school as well.
I have one more question. So if we had to expand to a second room, the cost of the new person that was going to be in there overseeing the in-school suspension, does the state reimburse us for that? Oh, the state doesn't, but they can mandate us once again to just making sure. Okay, thank you.
So Jackie first.
And Bob, thank you so much for that detail. Can you go just one step further so I can get a picture of this? So there's a classroom at both high schools. The professional in the room is a teacher, is a paraprofessional? Is there a ratio of students to adults?
Yeah, the typical staffing is done by a staff member who is on his or her supervision. So teachers are assigned to different roles in the high school, things they might supervise. Some teachers have as their supervision time of the in-school suspension room.
So during the day, each period, the adult in the room could be, it's a revolving door.
That's right, Mrs. Romberg. It'll be a different
I
person each period.
But you
That's
could get
right.
a math teacher or science teacher, it could work to the student's advantage.
You could absolutely.
Yeah, because
Yes.
kind of neat.
And at the middle school, again, it's done by the office person, it's done by the assistant principal's principal.
But it is a certified staff person in there.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this just occurred to me, so if you want to answer this next time, that's fine too. But as I was listening to Susan's questions, one of the reasons for out-of-school suspension is if there's an altercation between two students, we try to remove them from each other and give them time to kind of be separated by their out-of-school suspension. Now we're going to put them in the same small room. So have we thought about that at all?
Oh, yes, that has
Okay,
occurred.
okay.
Yes. And it's one of the many things that we're going to try to work through with the implementation of the new law. Listen, we want to avoid exclusionary discipline when possible, and everything depends on everything.
Right.
One scenario might be, maybe the students get a 2-day suspension, and it might be that student A spends today in the in-school room and tomorrow out of school, and the other student does the opposite. That might be a way to buy us a little bit of time. Not always will it work that way, but that might be one way to skin that cat. So there's going to be some creativity, and what we want to do is to do what's right for the students, and we need to comply with the law, and we believe we're going to be able to do that.
On that point, correct me if I'm wrong, but if there is an altercation and the emotions seem high, we can still do the out-of-school suspension. We can do it for 3 days with no repercussions. If we go over 4, then we have to provide some kind of support services. But, we can still go up to 10 days. It's just the rules have changed a little bit in that we have to show that it poses a threat to the safety of other students. And if there is that much animosity where 3 days isn't going to do it, then we still have that capability just as we do now, correct?
That's right, Mr. Yance, we do. And we do want to, though, in the spirit of the law, we want to attempt to not exclude.
Sure. No, I agree with
And
that
so-
100%. But my point is, if we feel there is a danger,
Yes,
a safety danger, we can still put them out of school.
correct.
And I would
Yeah,
say
that's-
that even for a normal fight,
Right.
we're not going to put people out of school for multiple days and just to get them to cool down. I think that cooling down happens pretty quickly, I would imagine.
Again, I think everything depends on everything. It
Sure.
depends on the disagreement, it
But
depends on
one
what
thing they
happened.
talk about is every case is unique.
That's correct.
So,
You answered my question. Your question answered my question. No.
I was going to ask if we could invite some of our legislators to spend a day in the full-day suspension at school. I think that would be interesting for them.
Well, as I've shared with you, we are planning our next legislative breakfast. Perhaps that could be a topic.
Something we should bring up.
Yeah.
anyone else? Comments, questions on? Okay. Next.
Okay, the
Oh,
next,
do we want to vote on these together or separately?
I think
I'll ask the
together's
board.
fine.
Together's fine?
I think it's
Okay.
fine, yeah. Thank you for that.
Carry on.
Bringing that back to us.
210?
the other changes, the other proposed changes are the same as they were back in June. So policy 7210, we believe proposes appropriate revisions consistent with Senate Bill 100. There have been no changes since June. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Kristen?
It's not a question, it's more of a clarification, but just to clarify that this notice, et cetera, is what will be sent to students, because we more rarely expel and we more often place in lieu of expulsion. But this notice would be triggered because it's out of school, correct? Or would that be considered an out-of-school suspension of a longer period?
Here,
When we
let me try to answer. I
outplace-
think I can answer.
Yeah,
Whether the board votes to expel, which as you said, they very rarely do, or to outplace in lieu of expulsion, we would hold ourselves to the now higher standard required in the policy about expulsion, even if the student isn't expelled, even if he's placed out. We will apply this.
do we
the
need to,
rules.
do we need to state that? Because without knowing our policies, it doesn't, you wouldn't know it exactly. Like where we say before expulsion, or we could add, or placement in lieu of expulsion. You know what I'm saying? Just because without knowing the way that it looks as if this would imply for expulsion.
We certainly could. I wouldn't. And in talking with our attorney about that very point, you're right. We could say everywhere it says expulsion, comma, or outplacement in lieu of expulsion. We could. I don't know that it's necessary. I think it allows us, by following this process, whether the board expels or outplaces in lieu of expulsion, we're able to proceed. Also, it's conceivable that that one recommendation could be made by the administration and the board could take different action. So whether it's expulsion or outplacement in lieu of expulsion, we'd be following this proposed policy. But of course,
it's not clear
if you
that we are. We have decided that we will be, but it's not clear based on the policy that we would.
I would suggest this, because expulsion and alternative placement in lieu of expulsion are separate actions. I wouldn't confuse them in the same policy. I'd suggest we keep 7210 dealing with expulsion. Perhaps we can look at a mirror policy of like a 7212.
I think we
or
need one if
something
it's basically
that
just
addresses the
invisible in our
process
policy,
for
which it
alternative
is.
placement in lieu of. So that's what I would prefer to do.
That's fine. I
Yeah.
think it's fine to do that, but I would just suggest that we have a policy that actually meets our actions, because that is a far more common course than the expulsion.
Yep.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think, as a matter of fact, I think I said that in the last meeting, that the in lieu of is something we do all the time, and it's not spoken to.
Yep.
And a mirror policy would be great, because the important thing to realize, the same requirements are there as far as a danger to the school or to the safety of another student or staff. And I think that would help if that were spelled out somewhere. So it could look exactly the same, like you said, 212 with just word insertion. So I think it would make a lot of sense. Other comments on that or anything else? Okay, so we won't do them all at once.
No, I think we can approve.
Oh, yes, right, we
210,
can
yeah.
still do 210.
Add a new one.
Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. No, I'm okay with that. Everybody okay with that? Okay. 220.
7220 and 7230, no proposed changes since June.
Any comments or questions? Go ahead.
Just to piggyback on what Kristen said, so is that a new policy that will be brought to us in the near future? I just don't want to lose.
August or September.
Okay,
probably
I just
like
don't want to
September,
lose.
just to review it.
Lose the thought.
We'd want to
yeah.
get you two meetings, so probably we'll shoot for September.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anything on the buses?
Question.
Susan?
Do we still have activities buses or some kind of 5 p.m. bus or something like that?
Yes.
And is that in here somewhere to include those buses? Is that a problem?
This policy would apply at any time students are on our buses, field trips, or to and from school.
Late bus, whatever.
School
you call it.
bus.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Then 7.230.
And for 230, there were no proposed changes and remain no proposed changes other than a review date of July of 2016.
I think that's all you did, yeah. Change the date. And one Guns Free Schools Act number. So. Any other comments?
I'm sorry, I'm going back to Susan's question, but even if you weren't able to ride the bus, you probably wouldn't be able to ride a bus on a school field trip, wouldn't you? Those are two different things, right? Because this is.
We're talking about the after-school suspension?
No. I'm back to the bus conduct.
Right.
Susan just asked about the activity bus and then
I'll kind of
the
give
field
you.
trip
I'll kind
bus.
of give you a. Oh, go ahead, Bob. Looks like you're gonna.
I was just going to reread it very quickly. Go ahead.
I can imagine there are scenarios, depending on what the field trip is for, where the school may still prohibit a student because of their conduct on the bus. If it is a required field trip of some sort to support curriculum, then we would have to allow the student to participate or provide an alternative activity for credit.
And it is permissive. It says is authorized. So it wouldn't require you it wouldn't require you to suspend them in all cases.
Is there anything else on the bus conduct? Was there anything else on the students with disabilities? That's 2:30. Okay, well, if there's no other comments, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the 4 policies presented in 11.01 as presented.
So I move to approve item 11.01, the policy review for the second reading of the policies in section 7, specifically 7.200, 7.210, 7.220, and 7.230.
Okay, I have a motion and second to approve 11.01 as presented. Any other comments or questions? Roll call.
Wanke?
Yes.
Yench?
Aye.
Prati?
Yes.
Kush?
Aye.
Romberg?
Yes.
Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And then finally, 11.02, we had our public hearing. That didn't take any action. Now it's our turn to take action. So I would open it up again to the board for any questions or comments you wanted to make before it's brought up
okay.
for a vote.
It's okay, I'd like to make one additional comment again, mostly for the community who's watching. The action we're requesting of the Board of Education this evening is the approval to allow the administration to submit an application for the waiver from the school code, and that still must be acted upon by the General Assembly during their fall session. So upon their action, then, we'd have permission to be able to do what we're seeking through the waiver. So that's the only action this evening is the approval for the application of the waiver.
And if I recall, the waiver would begin with the 2018-19 school year.
Right.
And if from asking your questions, there's a few other school districts who've gone forward in doing something similar, correct?
That's correct. We're
Yeah.
aware of 3.
Donna?
Just a quick comment. I just want to thank our administration because I think this is a good indication of how we are just progressive and looking to challenge our students in different ways and provide different opportunities for them that is outside of school code, but very much in line with, like Jackie said, the goals that we have for our students. And so, yeah, so thank you.
Anything else?
I'd also,
Go ahead.
just to concur with what my colleague just mentioned, I just think it really demonstrate that the district is forward-thinking and doing the best that we can to keep the students at the cutting edge and giving them the best learning opportunities possible.
Anyone else? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the application for a waiver to online blended seat time.
I so move.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve 11.02, request for waiver for online blended seat time. Roll call.
Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Wanke?
Yes.
Prati?
Yes.
Yench?
Aye.
Romberg?
Yes.
Kush?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, any new business? Any old business? Then, real quickly, Dan already mentioned this, new school year is fast arriving, so we have our next meeting August 1st. Then new educator breakfast is already August 12th, less than a month away. First day of school, what is it? Where is it? It's not even on here?
That was not on there. We have every other event that we're aware of through the whole school year.
So
There,
what is it?
Mrs.
You have it
Well
memorized.
done. So we'll have to get it. It is Wednesday, August 17th.
There you go, August 17th. Perfect. Any other comments, questions on the agenda? Anything we left out, public content there? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second?
Have a motion second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you, Michael.